Hello, my name is Taylor Coyne, joining you from Los Angeles.
And my name is James Cook, coming you this week from Denver, Colorado.
Insert gasp.
What? On the road again? We both research retail and real estate for JLL.
And this is everything we know about retail.
That's right, Taylor. It's the show where we tell all of you everything we know about retail, 3 things at a time. Which begs the question, Taylor, what do you know about retail?
Well, I know that Macy's is doubling down on New York City. What do you know?
Cool. Well, I know for one thing, casual dining appears to be poised for a comeback, but things aren't necessarily going to return to the way they were before. But before we get into that, Taylor, I want to hear what's going on with Macy's in the Big Apple.
I'm glad you asked. So here is the first thing that I know about retail, and it is that Macy's wants to build a commercial office tower on top of its flagship store in Herald Square, which pretty big news, because let me also tell you the price tag of the office tower is $235 million.
Well, I mean, it's a weird time to do speculative office space. You know, the fact that most people are still working from home and there's sort of that expectation people are returning, but it hasn't happened yet. Interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this project.
All right. So I'm going to also show you what it looks like.
Oh, nice.
It looks like this. So this is the $235 million investment. It's not just the office tower, some of the surrounding areas too, improving. It's going to make it a pedestrian only area. It's going to improve some of the subway access. So that's kind of how you get to this very large price tag. And if you see in this picture, so the middle, very glass towers, the office, and then right below you can just see the Macy's star,
Right.
that building
Just
on the bottom.
barely.
Yeah, which is, kind of funny, but I mean, New York density for you, that it's hard to see the actual Herald Square Macy's building, but it is sitting on top of it. You can get the glimpses of the building. And, it makes sense that, Macy's has obviously had some, we've talked about it as a struggling retail for a while, and we'll kind of get into some of the things that they've been trying to do. But this store is iconic. This store opened more than 100 years ago in 1902. That is a long time ago that it has been, serving the community.
Before I ever went to Macy's Herald Square, I'd seen the movie Miracle on 34th Street. I mean, it is, whatever, Thanksgiving Day parade. Wasn't Santaland Diaries, that David Sedaris, Santaland
Yes.
Diaries, isn't that at Macy's? Like, this is Americana. So I can see how they wouldn't want to demolish it, but instead build on top of it. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, recently, what was it, a couple of months ago, that they closed their store on Michigan Ave and in Chicago. So, you're kind of hearing these stories, but, this is there's so much history and tradition at this specific store. Again, like you said, the Thanksgiving Day parade, I mean, talk about what is more Americana and, what I would have to assume almost every household turns into, at least for a little bit, on Thanksgiving Day. There's the flower shower. There's the 4th of July fireworks, Miracle on 34th Street, all of this stuff that happens in this building. So I think Macy's is like, okay, this is where we really want to reinvest in the community, make sure that our brand is strong. This is another rendering, again, like I mentioned, that $235 million isn't just the office tower. It's to, really improve this entire square around Herald Square, which, fun fact, my first internship was like catty corner from the Macy's in Herald Square. And it was a very hot summer, so I used to pop in there quite a lot because it was air conditioned.
When you worked there, did they have that little food hall in the basement, or was that built later?
I think that was after my internship time, or if it was, I was just not in the know, but I have a feeling it came later. because they
I
still
mean,
kind of
food
were
halls
making.
abroad.
Yes.
Yeah,
And at that point, it
it's
was
not quite a
definitely a
food
food
court.
court. At that point, it was definitely, if it was there, it was a food court. It was not a food hall. We didn't know about that kind of branding yet. Um,
Right. That didn't mean anything to you.
yeah. But just for context for who's kind of familiar with this part of Manhattan, also just kind of understanding, oh, this is, it's not just about the building. It's about all of these different transit entrances. Also, this gets into a little more nerdy plannery stuff, but I'm obviously really into that. But I think a lot of this won't necessarily happen either, right? They've got to go through a rezoning. They've got to, this is not by any means that they're going to be breaking ground tomorrow. But I think I think I commend Macy's for coming up with a plan to try to really reinvigorate their brand in New York.
Well, they don't. I would imagine they don't have funding for this yet. They're probably looking for funding partners,
Yeah, I
which
think this is
it,
very beginning of these ideas for sure.
it's a big ask. I think though, with the slow, what say 10 to 15 year construction cycle for a project this big, like by the time it delivers, yeah, probably that office demand is going to be back.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that. And they said, so in their kind of proposal, they said that the city is expecting a return to pre-pandemic office employment levels by Q4. I think that's probably ambitious, but to your point of the
Yeah.
timeline of construction of how long everything takes, yes, 10, 15 years from now, we're in a very different place than we are right now versus tomorrow versus the end of the year. So, we'll see.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Like these department stores are like, we got this real estate. The department store thing's not working out very well. Let's become developers. Sears did that with the Seritage spinoff. We'll see if Macy's can be successful at it. It's a whole different it's a whole different skill set
Yeah,
to be successful with a project like this. So we'll see how it goes.
absolutely. But they're trying because right, so there's this, and then obviously a completely different type of trying is the Market by Macy's. There's kind of smaller format store that has the cafe. Those are going into strip centers. I think they only have two right now. And then their Polaris strategy, which is took me a while to realize this, but it's a play on their long-standing star logo, which didn't even
Right.
cross my mind, which says maybe something about my deductive reasoning. But anyway, but that's like their long term. I think it's a 3-year strategy, merchandising, supply chain, a lot of e-commerce, and it also includes closing stores. So again, they're really just doubling down on the real estate that they know that, again, iconic tradition. So they're holding on.
It's a good brand. I'm really rooting for them. I feel
Yeah.
good about them. I hope they figure it out.
And on the last positive note that I will mention about Macy's is that at the end of April, S&P Global Ratings raised their outlook from negative to positive on Macy's also. It's
Wow.
tied to some economic recovery just because apparel is picking up now again, now that people are going outside and it's not just sweatpants. And there was a lower than expected profit and sale decline in Q4 as a little momentum going into Q1 as well. So again, just feel like this was a good week for Macy's, or I should say a good couple of weeks for Macy's. So we'll see where it goes.
That's
And
awesome.
James, what do you know about retail?
Oh, well, Taylor, the second thing I know about retail is this week I'm in Denver for a little getaway trip, kind of a working vacation here in the city. And it's been great. Like, it's really nice to be back in a city. Actually, the first day, so I've got a couple of things I want to share with you. The first day we were out walking, and we walked past Tavernetta, which is just down the street from here. And I
You saw
noticed
a
this new
pod.
construction. They're called Alpenglobes. I wanted to call them igloos, but they're called Alpenglobes. Apparently, they're manufactured in Utah, and they're very permanent looking. Like they're very nice construction. So it does not seem like this is the kind of thing that is just going to be around for COVID, is going to disappear. Denver's dining is back, but they're at 50% capacity. Did some indoor dining this week. Fantastic. 2 thumbs up. But I was just thinking, like, a year from now, if I have the option of eating in an Alpenglobe or eating in the actual restaurant proper, I'll probably choose the restaurant, right? I mean, what do you think?
I don't know. Is there music in the Alpenglobe?
So I don't know about that specific one, but I looked at the manufacturer's website. They're manufactured in Utah, and there are upgrades. So you can get a Sonos
Of
music
course there
system.
are. They're tiers, right? They're going to be tiers. Of course there are. I want the platinum version up top.
And Tavernetta is operated by Michelin Star Restaurant Group. So I imagine they're probably went all in and got the upgrades. It's just that, let's say it's the middle of winter, you open the door to go to the restroom inside the restaurant, and now you've got to walk through the cold and go inside. It's not connected. So that's why I feel like it might be fun to do it, but it's not like going to be your standard thing when COVID goes away.
I think that's it. I think there's like a novelty to it. I can see also maybe going and wanting to sit in one of those with a group. But I mean, again, the whole thing that we've been talking about this past year, one of the best things about going to the restaurant is just the people, the buzz, the energy that you have when you're at a restaurant. So if you're sitting kind of by yourself in an alpenglobe, it removes that. But I think there's a time and place. But yes, I think you're probably right. I'm a little bit more excited about it because I'm like, oh, that looks so cozy and fun. And because also I'm thinking Denver in the winter too, so it's chilly and that sounds fun and cozy. But I think it's, good for them for pivoting when they had to. But
Yeah, absolutely. I was trying to find out how much they cost. It said, email them for a quote. I mean, I gotta say, for two of those, you're looking at, if I had to guess, I'd say 150,000, at least 100,000, right? It's like really
those are
solid.
Yes, and with like the wood and I'm assuming that was wood that I was seeing that was holding them all together. Yeah, that was not shoddy construction. That was not.
No, it up close, it feels like Park City, Utah, Wood Lodge, or I'm in Colorado, I should say Breckenridge,
I was just thinking though, if they keep them around because they are that expensive, I can see a couple of proposals happening next year because it's really romantic. It's just the two of you in an alpenglobe. So, again, a time and place for the alpenglobe.
Yes. So then on Monday, I was over at the Dairy Block, and I stopped in at the Milk Market, which is the food hall. So Dairy Block is a big mixed-use project. It's got a lot of office, retail. And the last time I was at this food hall, it was bustling. And as you can see, not so much yet. Now, this was 8:30 in the morning, right? But what I really noticed was all the changes they made. So since COVID, since I was there last. So there's arrows on the floor, where to stand, where to go. You don't queue up to order. You sit down at your table. You scan a QR code at your table. You make the order. You pay on your phone. And you type in what table number you are. And they bring the food directly to you, which is great. And I think about having to go to a food hall and everybody's like, well, I'll queue up over here, you queue up over here, and we'll meet back here. This makes it a lot easier. This is a more kind of cool, relaxed way to go to a food hall. My question is, do these COVID changes persist beyond, as we're exiting COVID? I think this will for a while. But I think you get to a point where the food hall is so bustling that this doesn't work anymore. Like if you can't find a table, then there's no way to order and tell them to bring it to your table.
Right. And also for some reason, one of the first things that I went to, I was like, well, what if I have a question about what the best sandwich is from your food hall stall? Even little things like that. So maybe even I'm with you that the QR codes are here for a while. And also QR codes for different purposes will of course be here for a while. But some of this ordering, have you been to the restaurant yet where you just order by the QR code and they don't have a menu at the table?
Yeah, just like this week that happened to me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not my favorite. I know I mentioned that last week on the podcast or on our video. Not my favorite, but again, I get it. So I think some of that will have to fade. But yeah, sometimes you just want to know what the best sandwich is, and you got to ask, the people behind the counter what the best sandwich is. So again, it goes back to this half needing human interaction, and then sometimes you just want efficiency and not to talk to anyone.
And these COVID solutions work great if you're at low capacity. And then I was thinking too, for turnover, if you're ordering from your table, sitting at the table, waiting for the food at your table, that means that table's not available for anybody else to eat at. So when there's a big office tower right above that. So when all those office workers are back, maybe by the end of this year, crossing fingers, we want that turnover to be fast. We want you to eat your food and leave. We don't want people sitting and hanging out too much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. They'll probably, as soon as, I wonder what the capacity will be, but as soon as they hit that, I feel like they're like, all right, and now you have to stand in line and order from the counter. Even though I will say the arrows, not about the one way, like walk down this hallway or this aisle, but I do really appreciate it for those places where, are you ever, you see a line and you're that next person that either has to go like right or left or loop back, and you're like, which is the right one to do? I do appreciate that helpfulness. So keep those decals on the floor. That is helpful no matter what.
Arrows are good. Yeah, they tell people where to go.
Yeah.
So yesterday I was out running, and I luckily had my phone on me because I ran past Larimer Street. Larimer is a street that's got a bunch of restaurants on it. We actually ate at Osteria Marco, which was one of them, fantastic Italian restaurant. This street's always been open to traffic until COVID. They closed it down. They've turned it all into open air dining. Different restaurants have dealt with it different ways. You can see some have the enclosed tents. Some have just put tables out. But this is great.
It looks awesome.
It's
Just
so much better. And the thing with this street was you'd be sitting out. I've eaten outside on the street before, and cars are driving by with the exhaust and whatever. This is so much better. Really cool. I think COVID's done a lot of good stuff for cities. I don't know if you're familiar with 16th Street. Well, I'm sure you are, right around the corner. That's another street in Denver that's been pedestrianized for years and is very popular because of it. So we kind of know that pedestrianizing a street does good things. There's been some speculation they're going to close Larimer to cars permanently. I think the restaurants like it and the stores on that street. Denver is about to pass a 5-year pilot, which will allow people on streets like Larimer, like special districts, to take their drinks around and walk around in the street with their drinks, a la New Orleans or whatever.
Yep.
So, Taylor, I know there's this big question, like, businesses are afraid of closing streets because they think it's going to cut down on business traffic. I know you looked into this a little bit. Did you find any data to refute that?
Yes. And also, I feel like this is a topic that comes up all the time because everyone loves their cars and everyone freaks out when you potentially are going to take away a parking spot. To be fair, I live in LA, so that is like of heightened concern. My goodness, what happens if I cannot park directly in front of the store? But something interesting that I just saw in a City Lab article, and I don't know if you're familiar with City Lab, but they all cover, it's through Bloomberg now, and they cover a lot of these, urban stories and what's going on in our urban lives. And they looked at, or I guess I should say some Yelp analysts looked at this and Bloomberg picked it up. But basically, they looked at interest in restaurants before these cities or, local neighborhoods shutting down a street to traffic, and then afterwards during COVID time. So if you're looking at Valencia Street in San Francisco, let's just for ease say that that's 20%. So Valencia Street saw a 20% pickup of interest after the street was made pedestrian only, meaning people were far more interested really to go and hang out on that street and to find some place to eat. If there were no cars, it also just gave you more space, right? Especially during COVID. One, it's just a delight. But two, you could just feel more free that you could avoid other people when you're just walking around, which is, something that we've all been trying to do for the past year. Not on this chart, but car-free Vanderbilt Ave in Brooklyn in the Prospect Heights neighborhood, Yelp reported an average of 54% more customer visits after the first month of the program.
Wow.
So I think, this is going to be the age-old debate of that. I think restaurants are finally understanding that this is great. I think businesses sometimes feel a little bit more questionable, and it depends on what your business is. If you're constantly going and maybe you have a bulky item and now all of your customers have to park further away, I can kind of understand that. But also there's always never any guarantee you can park right in front of a business anyway. But I think, again, to your point, there's data to prove that these pedestrian-only streets are popular and that they are good for business, especially for restaurants who have, as we know, had a really hard year. So I know there have been a couple of cities, not just Denver, across the country who are making some of these changes permanent. I know here in LA, we're proposing or we're exploring at least a way to streamline the process if you want to get into it. Not necessarily that any of them are getting converted. So hopefully it's more things that we see because, like you said, pedestrian-only street is wonderful.
Yeah. And you know, most cities where I drive to, I'm going to park in a parking garage and then walk that last little bit anyway. It's rare that I get a rock star spot out front. So, you know, for me, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I think there's just like some I personally don't, but also just have an expectation. Sure, I'm going to park a block away, but my walk is going to be really nice too. I
Right.
think that that's part of it. I'm not going to get hit by a car and I'm just going to see people out and enjoying themselves. And it's just a leisurely experience. So I really do. I hope that that's something that sticks post COVID.
Awesome. Love it.
So, James, I hear you might know something else about retail. What is it?
Well, Taylor, it's time for the third thing that I know about retail. We've been talking about this for as long as we've been doing this show, because we started this show during COVID. When would the return to normal happen? And we kind of have been jokingly saying, well, the day that we say things are normal again, we're going to call it Normal Thursday.
Yes.
So my question for you is it Normal Thursday yet?
Though, can we just at least celebrate, even if it's not Normal Thursday yet, the fact that you're even going to ask me, is it
Right.
Normal Thursday yet? I feel like we've made huge progress. So just going to put that out there.
Well, here's my, okay. I'm going to take the pro on the fact that I think it's Normal Thursday. I'm going to say I went to 2 restaurants this week. They were at 50% capacity, but I was not wearing a mask while I was eating, obviously. I've had beers indoors. I've been walking around in the streets, past people. I went on a run without a mask in the city. It feels 80% normal to me at this point, which compared to how lousy the last year and a half's been, like, I'm kind of saying, is it Normal Thursday? Okay, I'm willing to call it Normal Thursday. What do you think?
So I'm gonna because why not? I'm gonna play the opposite side
Take the con.
say no.
Okay.
And say no because and I think maybe it's because of all of the news about vaccinating children is coming out. But here in LA, not everyone is back at school. I think for some people it is now Normal Thursday, but I think for the majority of us it's still not Normal Thursday. I think we are close.
Okay.
We are close, but I just feel until, and I read something else too about, it was actually funny that you say that because I just saw this morning, and to be fair, I didn't read the whole thing, but that we're opening up schools. There's a real push, open up 100% all schools in the fall. And it kind of occurred to me, I was like, all right, there's still some kids who are not going to school full time. They're online or they're not going at all and they're half day. And I was like, until that can happen, until, all of those parents can also who kind of resume normal activities as well. Part of me feels like that's Normal Thursday.
Okay. So this is a great point. Don't have kids, so don't have that whole experience at all. We're going to put this on hold. You made a great point. We've still got a whole group of people with families, people who are in other countries that are on different vaccination scales. It's not Normal Thursday yet, but I'm going to keep asking that question. Interesting.
And I think that's fair. I think it's fair to keep asking about it because, again, for me too, as just myself, really, then yes, it's starting to feel more and more like that. But it's hard to continue to ignore some of the other things where I'm like, oh yeah, it's still not totally normal, but getting there.
Yeah. So there was a Harris poll that came out this week that said 67% of Americans feel like the pandemic is behind us. I'm getting there. I would say the majority is behind us. So I feel good about that. So a lot of people feel like we're heading towards normality, which normal place.
I 100% believe that, even though, again, another funny thing, I say, well, when in the pandemic, I'm like, sorry, we're still in a pandemic. I recognize that we are still in a pandemic, but it just feels a lot better. So it does feel like, the peak, the worst. We are headed in a positive direction, not a negative one again.
Yeah. And so I said that all those people said the pandemic is behind us. Almost as many people are anxious about returning to social activities, 61%. So people are like, yeah, we're getting into the normal, but now I'm stressed out. I thought I would be. I haven't had any trouble yet. I don't know how. What do you think about that?
So it's interesting. I'm going to say it's a mixed. I saw it was a friend's birthday. We still did it in a park because it was a lot of different people, but everyone there was vaccinated. And I knew everyone, even if they weren't my friends, but they were good friends of friends. You know, it was funny too. Someone had said, what you lost we all lost acquaintances in the pandemic, which is so true. Didn't even cross my mind. But anyway, there were a couple of acquaintances there. I didn't feel anxious about it all because I knew all of these people, you know, even if it wasn't like a personal connection. And I knew that everyone else was, you know, still being safe and vaccinated and all of those things. I think I might feel a little differently if you shoved me into a concert hall.
Right.
So there's like two different levels of these social activities. And who knows? I haven't been shoved into a concert hall, but I did just see the Greek is opening this summer. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm absolutely going to look at tickets, see what I can go and like, and then I will be very excited about it. But to be fair, the Greek is also in the open air.
It's open air. Right. Right.
So it's all tiered. That's my long answer. It's tiered.
I've talked to people who have bought concert tickets for the fall, indoors. So here's our last little indicator from this most recent Harris poll. Only 22% of Americans said they'd feel comfortable socializing with a stranger in a bar. Now, I would, because, again, you know, I feel like I got vaccinated, you know, I don't know. For whatever reason, that's mentally helped me a lot. The thing is, I don't talk to strangers in bars very much. I'm usually going with other people. This number pre-COVID was probably pretty low, right? Maybe it was 50%, but that's still 22% is really low.
It is. And again, I think that it's like that stranger danger. And like I said, it was, you know, hanging out with people that aren't my friends, but you know, there's a comfort in like, oh, I may not know you, but I know my very good friend vouches for you. So I feel better. Right. Again, it's this whole last year. Don't talk to anyone that's not in your household. It sticks. It sticks. But to your point also, I really wish you had asked me that question pre-pandemic and what my answer would have been, because it also still would have been low.
You know, Taylor, as a business traveler, especially doing a lot of that, sometimes I'd find myself eating dinner at a bar in a hotel or something, and I've definitely had conversations with strangers, and some of them have been quite pleasant. So, you know, I feel comfortable. I think, yeah, my next work trip, whenever that is, probably in the fall, like I could see that happening.
Yeah, for sure. And also there is something, again, I had to go into our downtown LA office the other day, and I ended up just kind of like chatting with the people in the building for a while, you know, because no one was there. They're like the only people who were there. And I was just like, oh, interactions with strangers. This is so nice.
Idle chit chat with strangers. It's a lost art. We're going to have to relearn how to do it. How was it? How did you do it?
It was like, it came naturally. It was. And it wasn't too much either. It wasn't like, oh, tough, you know, it wasn't about the weather and it wasn't about COVID, which is the real, I mean, weather, I don't know. I always talk about the weather, so that's fine. But you know what I mean? It wasn't like, let's just talk about the pandemic only. So it was just like nice. I was just like, all right, this is what it's like to just have casual interactions with people you don't know. Granted, we were inside in the office building, so everyone was masked and all of that. So it was still not normal, but little things.
Cool. Well, we're going to keep our eyes peeled. And when people don't feel anxious and they're back to being in bars and at restaurants and concerts, we will officially deem it Normal Thursday. For now, we'll just keep asking that question. Hey, if you want to hear more in-depth interviews about retail and retail real estate, you should probably check out our podcast. It's called Where We Buy. It's on any podcast app that you like to use, or you can stream us online at wherewebuy.show.
And then you can also hit the subscribe button someplace in YouTube. One day,
I still don't know.
I'll figure it out. I think this is my favorite segment of the show, because never did I ever think I'd be like, hit our subscribe button. There's also a bell icon, which will alert you that there's a new show that came out. And on that note, the next episode will be next Thursday, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. And for all of the strangers that James has met at the bar this week, it's also 10 a.m. in Denver. You can get that at everythingweknow.show.
Oh, I love it. So, Taylor, you know, since we're here, we're chatting, what else do you know about retail?
James, I'll tell you more next week.